The White House is refusing to acknowledge a mistake by White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, who attempted to discredit Congresswoman Frederica Wilson's account of a phone call between President Trump and the widow of a soldier killed in action. The White House position culminated in this exchange on Friday.
Have you seen the speech?
I have.
And then you know that most of it was her effusively praising these FBI agents. And when she was talking about what she did in Congress, she was not talking about securing the $20 million. She was talking about naming the building for these FBI agents, who she then went on to effusively praise. And that was the bulk of the speech.
She also mentioned that, and she also had quite a few comments that day that weren't part of that speech and weren't part of that video that were also witnessed by many people that were there. What General Kelly referenced yesterday.
Tell us specifically, because
exactly what he said. There was a lot of grandstanding. He was stunned that she had taken that opportunity to make it about herself.
Can he come out here and talk to us about this at some point?
I think he's addressed that pretty thoroughly yesterday.
No, he was wrong yesterday in talking about getting the money. The money was
if you want to go after General Kelly, that's up to you. But I think that if you want to get into a debate with a four-star Marine general, I think that's something highly inappropriate.
Later, Sarah Huckabee Sanders issued a statement trying to clarify her remarks. Quote, "Of course, everyone can be questioned," she said, "but after witnessing General Kelly's heartfelt and somber account, we should all be able to agree that impugning his credibility on how to best honor fallen heroes is not appropriate."
You know, we could just take it down to a very base level and say that tweeting about the Congresswoman during the funeral of the soldier is incredibly inappropriate.
Well, without
what the president did.
talking about the soldier.
So we can impugn him.
So,
meanwhile, because that's just a terrible act.
It's
sick. Go ahead.
Let's go ahead and play. Here's General David Petraeus.
Right.
And he found himself criticized. Remember in uniform when there were people that had General betray us? When he was trying to push the surge,
right.
A lot of really prominent Democrats, and despite that, this is what he said.
I think we're all fair game. We, in uniform, protect the rights of others to criticize us.
I love that, Steve Ratner. We are in uniform to protect the rights of others to criticize us. There is a theme, though, here. A sort of autocrat in waiting theme at the White House, where you have a lot of little autocrats running around there thinking that Donald Trump is somehow unchained from checks and balances of James Madison and the Constitution and Hamilton. We remember back to when Stephen Miller said, "The president shall not be questioned." One of the most tyrannical things I've ever heard uttered from the White House. And you take that to four-star generals shall not be questioned. She pulled it back. But what is disturbing is this is their instinct. How dare you question us?
Yeah, there's no question, no pun intended, there's no question that they don't believe that their actions should be questioned, and they have this sort of autocratic pushback blanket at all costs kind of mentality. And I think it is fair game to question what General Kelly did or didn't say. That said, I would say, as a parent, as someone who can't even begin to imagine what it's like to have that casualty officer that General Kelly turn up on your doorstep at dawn to tell you something heartbreaking, I find this whole thing nauseating, to be perfectly honest, that we have taken the death of an American soldier, and it has become politicized.
And the pain of his family.
And has become politicized, and perhaps the bulk of the blame lies on Donald Trump's doorstep. But I don't think I think there are a lot of other people that don't have completely clean hands here, and I think it's really sad what we've come to as a country, that this has become the issue of the day, the death of this poor kid and how it was handled thereafter.
I actually, who else except for the President of the United States really has any responsibility here for what went wrong?
Well, there hasn't been.
I can't think of one
There
person.
hasn't been a grown-up.
The Congresswoman is a friend of the family. She wasn't running around grandstanding.
Okay. Well, the president, Mark, was saying from the very beginning that you've got to be very careful when you're listening in on conversations from the president, and then you run out and talk about it in the press. So some people could look to her, some people could look to General Kelly, who in all of his eloquent remarks, and I will say again, I thank God General Kelly's there, but even he didn't make it about the soldier that was fallen. He didn't talk about the soldier that was fallen.
Family.
He talked politics, talked about the Congresswoman enraged him so much he had to go up to Arlington. Again, no talk about this young man, this American hero who fell. He had an opportunity as well to be the grown-up, and he still needs to come out and remind everybody it's about this young man who has fallen and then move on. Nobody's doing that. There is no grown-up in the House, and yes, this all began with Donald Trump. All began with Donald Trump, and that's unfortunate. But Julie Pace, this is a great example of, well, you've got a question, and I guess as a reporter, this is something you're balancing all the time. Is this a self-inflicted wound, or is this week's version of the NFL and kneeling 2 weeks ago, where is Donald Trump actually just trying to distract us from the Russian investigation?
Or from what really happened
Trying to
in
distract
Niger?
us from what happened in Niger? Is he just trying to distract us from the fact that they haven't passed a single piece of legislation? Is he trying to distract us from the fact that he has the lowest approval ratings of all time for any first-year president? And how do you take these controversies du jour of the week that he keeps spitting out? He throws out an insult. He knows it's going to cause. Is he trying to distract us from something bigger, or does he just completely lost it?
Look, I think that actually is a central question of this presidency. This is a question we grapple with every day and every week, because you're right, there tends to always be some kind of controversy that bubbles up. It generally comes from the president himself. It generally gets pushed forward by the president himself. I do think that there is an element of the president liking the art of distraction. He does like to have a sideshow going on. A lot of his advisors don't like that, but they understand that that actually is, in some ways, strategic on his part. He does like the shiny objects. I think in this case, with this situation, with these 4 soldiers and everything that came from this controversy over the call to the family, I don't think that this is the same as the NFL. That was a situation where the president, once he latched onto that issue, actually felt like this was a winning issue for him. In this case, this is, I think, more an example of the president being really unwilling to admit a mistake, admit that he, probably shouldn't have gone after former presidents in the way that they handled calls to families of fallen soldiers. This was more the doubling down aspect of the Trump presidency. But what you saw, and this is what was so striking about last week, what you saw was General Kelly helping Trump along in that effort. That's what made this one so unique to me.
Richard?
Well, also, you asked the important question about whether this is the tactic of distraction. I think it also raises the question for us whether we're allowing ourselves to be distracted. Because there's some really big policy questions here. Why do we have somewhere between 750 and 1,000 Americans in Niger? This is not unique. We have thousands and thousands of Americans in other countries that people can't find on a map in this open-ended effort against terrorism. This is the question then of congressional authorization and oversight. Several leading people in the Senate were unaware of what we're doing. So we, as a country, just have to ask ourselves, because are we signed up for an open-ended war of this sort, literally, that is being waging across several continents? And
this morning we hear of the CIA's expanded role in Afghanistan, Mark. And also, I remember, Mika, your father, years and years ago, my God, maybe 8 years ago, saying it's very important for us to separate Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Al-Qaeda wants to knock down buildings in New York and Washington. The Taliban wants to run its country by 8th century rules. Well, we are now launching CIA to expand its covert role in Afghanistan. It's a lead story in the New York Times. This president, who was talking about retreating militarily, actually sending more troops and more operations out. And we're not talking about it because he's sending out stupid tweets that would punish our children for sending out.
You were talking about an important public policy issue, the one Richard raised, the fact that there's ignorance on the part of leading members of Congress about where Americans are stationed around the world, what the missions are. The New York Times story, the Niger mission, whatever it was, whatever the facts are, this is essential that members of Congress avoid the distractions of both parties and try to get their arms around this. President Trump talked about coming home America, but he also talked about being tough. And he has around him an unprecedented number of military people. And that is a recipe for, if there's a failure of congressional oversight, of the executive branch doing whatever it wants in the most important and profound responsibility it's got to defend America.
With a Republican House, certainly, that will not cross this president, that fear this president, that have basically given up their constitutional mandate to be a check on this president. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.